Watching a cow give birth is something special. Usually, though, they come out one at a time. So, when a cow on a farm in Western Australia went into labor, 2 farmers dropped everything to check it out. What came out next was something hardly anyone ever sees. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. David Cunningham had been farming most of his life. The land he worked on had been in his family for 3 generations. There were over 100 cows on the property, and he could recognize every single one. While most farmers used tags, David didn't need them. He remembered each cow by face and even gave them names. One of those cows, Nessie, had always been a bit unusual. Over the years, she'd given birth to 3 sets of twins. David had only seen twins a few times in his life, and they were supposed to be rare, only about 1 in 100 births. But Nessie kept proving that wrong. The first time she had twins, David was thrilled. The second time, not so much of a surprise. By the third time, he figured she just had a knack for it. Still, nothing could have prepared him for what came next. In the days before Nessie's next due date, David felt sure it was going to happen again. One evening, as he talked with his wife Julie, he said, "I'd bet you anything more than 1 head's coming out of Nessie soon." Julie hadn't been farming as long as David, but she knew her stuff. She'd learned from him, but now she could hold her own. She took the bet. The loser would have to finish the last 6 miles of fencing around the property. A brutal job. Every post had to be dug in by hand, set, and strung with wire. It could take a month or even more. David paused like he was thinking it over. "All right," he said, acting unsure, but as they shook on it, he couldn't help grinning. Julie squinted at him, already wondering if he was up to something. The next morning started off normal. Nessie was in her enclosure, resting before the birth. David walked over and gave her a gentle pat on the head. She leaned into his hand. "Morning, Nessie. You ready to pop out some twins today?" he said with a chuckle. She gave a little nod and slowly wandered toward the back fence. She looked tired, which made sense. Carrying 1 calf is hard enough. Twins are even tougher. David filled her feed bowl with a mix of corn, oats, and grass before heading off to do his morning chores. He fed the chickens, grabbed the eggs, and picked a few vegetables from the garden. He wasn't gone long, maybe an hour at most, but in that short time, everything had changed. He peeked into Nessie's enclosure and stopped in his tracks. She was tucked away in the far corner, restless and clearly uncomfortable. David knew that look. She was going into labor. Without wasting a second, he dashed to the nearby shed to grab everything he might need, a bucket, some rope, disinfectant, and he opened the head gate just in case. Most cows handled births on their own, but once in a while they needed a bit of help pulling the calf out. David had done this so many times it almost felt like second nature, like he was the farm's version of a doctor. By the time he got back, Nessie was already lying on her side. That was normal. Cows usually take that position when they're ready to start pushing. But everything was moving much faster than usual. Julie had seen the commotion from the window and came out to help, but mostly she wanted to see if she'd won the bet. "You're about to owe me 6 miles of fence, honey," she teased with a grin, but if they'd known what was really about to happen, they wouldn't have been so playful. David leaned in for a closer look. He saw 2 small hooves starting to appear, slowly inching their way out. That was a good sign. The calf was on its way, and surprisingly quick, too. Then came a little head. Within 20 minutes, the small calf flopped gently onto the grass and started to crawl. Just like that, Nessie had delivered again. "There's one," David called out proudly. He knelt back down, watching closely for what might come next. Julie chuckled at how sure of himself he was, but her smile quickly faded to surprise. Another calf was on its way. This one took a bit longer, but David didn't mind. "I win. Twins again, Julie." "I told you," he said, beaming. He gave Nessie a hearty pat and told her she'd done a great job. Julie just shook her head, half in disbelief. How did he always seem to know? Well, he had grown up around cows his whole life. It probably just came with experience, but what happened next reminded them both that no one knows everything. Just as they were packing up and getting ready to let Nessie rest with her babies, something felt off. Nessie hadn't moved. She was still lying on her side, and her body was tense. Worried she might be hurt, David quickly checked her breathing and heartbeat. Everything seemed okay, but Nessie still looked like she was straining. "No way," Julie whispered. Could there really be a third? Twins were already rare, but triplets, that hardly ever happened. Maybe 1 in a 100 zero births. But then, right before their eyes, Nessie gave one more push, and out came a third, tiny, healthy calf. Just as Julie and David were cleaning up, thinking it was all over, their hearts nearly stopped. There was a fourth one coming. After that final surprise, Nessie was done. She slowly stood up after nearly 4 exhausting hours and finally got to meet her babies properly. She licked them gently, cuddled up close, and made sure each one felt safe beside her. Julie and David stood there for a moment, completely amazed. Then they kicked into gear. They knew what had to happen, and it had to happen fast. They carefully separated 3 of the calves from Nessie. It might sound harsh to someone who's never worked on a farm, but they knew this was the best way to give them all a real chance. Cows usually can't care for more than 1 calf at a time, and the other 3 needed help to survive. The little ones cried as they were carried away, but David gently placed them in a separate barn with fresh grass, clean water, and bottles of milk. From now on, he'd be their caretaker. Meanwhile, Nessie stayed behind with the 4th calf. It was a girl, and she was already wobbling around playing beside her mom. After spending so much time crammed next to her 3 siblings, she finally had space to stretch out and explore. Cow births are risky, especially when more than 1 calf is involved. The chances of something going wrong go up with each extra baby. That's why David stayed close to the separated calves, watching them carefully. Thankfully, it turned out they'd made the right call. 6 weeks later, once the calves were strong and healthy, they were brought back to Nessie. She was thrilled. She nuzzled each one and proudly walked them into the field to meet the rest of the herd. At first, the other cows looked a bit puzzled, but soon enough, they welcomed the new little ones like they'd been there all along. For David and Julie, it was a moment they'd never forget. It truly felt like a miracle. And as for that bet, they both ended up working on the fence together that month. Technically, they both lost, but really, they felt like they'd won something much bigger. What an incredible story. If you enjoyed it, let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing real-life tales. You can also check out the rest of the stories on the channel if you're in the mood for